Welcome to Conflict TV. I am your host, James Rollins. Join us as we explore the core of human discord, from personal clashes to societal divides. Together, we'll discover the art of conflict resolution and celebrate the power of reconciliation. Stay tuned for stories that transform rivalry into understanding. As we learn from experts the art of transforming confrontation into common ground. Your journey to understanding how conflict meets resolution starts now. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, our viewing audience. We have joining us today Jill Sanders DeMott. Jill is a mediation professional and will be helping us to better understand mediation in relationships and divorce. This is your ultimate guide to navigating life's toughest twists with grace and grit. Picture this: a once loving partnership unraveling into a storm of emotions, finances, and tough decisions. Heartbreaking, right? But what if there's a better way than battling it out in court? Today, we're exploring deep into the transformative power of mediation in relationships and divorce, where heated disputes become pathways to fair agreements, emotional healing, and fresh starts. From tackling betrayal and power imbalances to harnessing online tools for long distance resolutions. Mediation isn't just about splitting assets, it's about honoring the human side of separation and rebuilding lives with empathy and equity. Joining us again, as I said, is Jill Sanders DeMott, a renowned divorce mediator who's guided countless couples through these turbulent waters.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me today, and I appreciate being on Conflict TV.
Jill, let's kick things off.
Okay.
As a divorce mediator, what are the key advantages of mediation over traditional court proceedings for couples going through a separation?
So when parties come to me, one of the things we talk about is how they can regain or take back control over their lives. And they have to face a lot of decisions moving forward in terms of how they're going to end their personal partnership and divide their financial partnership. And so that is a process that often is done through lawyers and the court system. But mediation can be a parallel process and create an opportunity for the parties to discuss each and every issue, ranging from parenting and support and custody and equitable distribution, and how all of those things are going to play out in their lives going forward.
Can you walk us through the typical steps involved in a divorce mediation process from the initial consultation to reaching a final agreement?
Sure. So what happens is I get a phone call from one of the parties, the husband or the wife and the wife, or the husband and the husband. One of them calls and they say, "We're thinking about getting divorced. Can you help us?" And what I do from then on is meet with both of them. And I do it first with a consultation where I explain to them what the process of mediation is and what it isn't, and how far it can take them. Because at some point, no matter how you choose to resolve the conflicts that arise in negotiating a settlement agreement, you still have to go through the court system to end your marriage. So I will meet with them. I explain the process. One of the benefits, the huge benefits of mediation, which is the same whether you do mediation for divorce, custody, businesses, neighbor, is that you control the outcome. You take responsibility for how things are going to go. And it can get a little tricky when you have a family situation, but oftentimes, who better to make these decisions for the lives of themselves and for the lives of their children than the two people involved? So we will have conversations about what is it going to look like when you're no longer living in the same house together? How are you going to parent your children? How are you going to support them in their lives, in their finances? How are you going to decide who remains in the marital residence and who leaves the marital residence? And if someone stays in the marital residence, how do you decide how that residence is supported? And once you decide how it's supported, for how long does it continue in that way? Or is there some eventual buyout or sale of the residence? These are all conversations that they would have with lawyers. But what happens with lawyers is that the lawyer will meet with the client, discuss all of these issues, and then they will negotiate with the other side to determine the outcome. In mediation, that negotiation takes place between the participants whose lives are being affected by these decisions.
Wow. That's such a pivotal point in the lives of a family.
It
And
is.
so, in your experience, what are the most common sources of conflict in marital relationships that lead couples to seek mediation?
Um, well, I'm hearing your question is asking me why they seek mediation when their marriage is failing as opposed to the legal system. And I think that if that's the question you're asking, the reason why people seek mediation is they're looking to avoid the horror stories that they've heard from the litigation process. They're looking for a process that's quicker and more cost effective. And mediation is those things as well. Um, but also, I think they're looking to make a difference and make it not hurt as much as the the typical divorce experience is portrayed. And I have found that when couples come, one of them is usually driving the bus. They're not both on the same page. And there are definite emotions that each of them bring to the table. And my job is to help them identify those, but to look forward. My job is not to um, fix those emotions or find a way to make those feelings be repaired, but to identify them, acknowledge that they're in the room, and help them to find resources if they need to address those emotions outside of the mediation process, but focus on the details of creating an agreement to move forward.
I know there can be a lot of different things, but I think also in addition to what you're saying there, in your experience, did you see like a common source of conflict, meaning, is it financial? Is it something else? What tends to be kind of, or is it all over the place?
It's all over the place. There are many reasons why people choose to end their marriage, and I've heard most of them. I've been doing this work for 40 years. Um, but everybody's different because every situation is different. And what brings one person to the table might have made someone else stay in the marriage. That's not up for the mediator to comment on. My job is to help them hear each other in their negotiations, to help them find solutions so that they can reach agreement and move forward with a document that's going to take them through the divorce, the future divorce in the court system, and give them a blueprint to live their lives going forward.
Divorce mediation is often more cost-effective than traditional court proceedings.
How do you handle high emotion situations during mediation sessions, such as when, one spouse feels betrayed or angry?
Well, when you're a mediator, you learn how to deal with those impasses and those conflicts. And it's the same process whether you're doing neighbor-neighbor mediation or parent-child mediation or divorce mediation. My job is to control the process and to help them find a way to communicate that's not destructive. And if someone is emotional, we want to give them the time and space to address and deal with that emotion, but we can't fix it. We can only help them move through it to moving forward. And that's what my job is.
That's got to be extremely challenging, especially with all the dynamics that are taking place in the midst of such a trying time. When you look at it, what role does financial transparency play in successful divorce mediation, and how do you ensure that both parties are fully informed?
So that's my job as well. And part of my role is to provide them information about all the laws that exist in New York State that impact their decision making. By that, I mean we have a statute that deals with child support. We have a statute that deals with maintenance, which everybody has always called alimony. We have a statute that deals with equitable distribution. And there are a number of factors that are looked at in deciding how property is divided. We have to identify marital property and separate property. We have to have property valued. In the litigation system, the court has the right to compel things from parties. In mediation, we don't have that right. But I do require that people fill out a net worth statement or provide all their financials. They provide statements of 401ks and retirement accounts and IRAs and valuations on homes and banking accounts and stocks and things like that. So we go through with fine detail all the same things that you would be going through if you were going through with lawyers. Our ability to do a deposition is non-existent. So we rely on our parties to be forthcoming. And we know enough because we've been practicing what it is that we're looking for. We require tax returns. And sometimes it's an opportunity for one of the parties to learn things that they never knew about the finances of their party, of their marriage. So because they're bringing in tax returns and because we're going over them, they can have questions of things that they never knew were being reported, or they're looking at a 401k and wondering where the money came from or why there isn't enough money there, or we go over all their credit card statements to review all their debt and look at what the expenses were and who incurred the debt and how are we going to manage the debt. So there's so much opportunity for the parties to become more informed than they would if someone was just reviewing that without them present and then making decisions based upon what they reviewed.
Does that lead you to think that, or should I say, address that there are kind of like macro conflicts, and then like micro conflicts within, the larger frame of what they're dealing with, especially since, as you just noted, this whole idea of transparency brings to light things that either have never been seen by some before.
It can be, and sometimes both parties are fully aware. But when it comes up, we have to deal with whatever the reaction is to information that is discussed. And that's part of the process is it's not going to change the disclosure, whether you're in the legal system or you're in mediation. The same issues present themselves. It's how you deal with them. And in mediation, there's always a better opportunity to be able to explain things.
We're going to take a break and then we're going to come right back. And right after the break, we'll continue
Great.
with this very, very insightful discussion on divorce mediation. We're glad to be back again with Jill Sanders DeMott, our subject matter expert on divorce mediation. Jill, as we were talking before the break, we were looking at the importance of transparency, and its role in a successful divorce mediation and how to ensure that both parties were fully informed. I'd like to continue along that same vein and ask, how do power imbalances, like one spouse being the primary breadwinner, affect the mediation process, and what strategies do you use to address them?
That's a very good question because oftentimes that's the case. And my job is to make sure I look for those power imbalances. I have limitations as to how much I can balance power without being for lack of a better word, non-neutral. So one of the ways, if there's truly a strong power imbalance, we might going over the details of a situation helps parties feel empowered. So that's one way. If that's not sufficient, meaning we go over your budget, we go over your finances, we educate you about the money that's coming in and what the needs are to go out. If that's not sufficient, and I feel the parties are still able to have these conversations, we might suggest that one of them or both of them consult with a mediator-friendly attorney outside of the process. Because often having somebody in your court who's friendly to mediation but is looking out only for your interests can strengthen someone's ability to speak for themselves in the mediation room. So that's another way that we can do it. If there are financial issues that are complicated and one party is way more knowledgeable, sometimes we bring in a financial expert and they can be part of the process as long as both parties agree. So there's a lot of ways to ensure that the power is balanced as best as possible. And in the situations where it can't be, where there truly is the inability of one party to speak for themselves because of a power imbalance, then mediation may not be the appropriate process for them.
Wow, you talked about mediation-friendly attorneys. Um, that's not often, perhaps, what some people think about when they hear the role of attorneys in a divorce situation because it's presented as, adversarial,
Correct.
me against you or you against me.
So that's absolutely true. And that can be often the way it is. But for instance, we always encourage people to take their agreement for review before they sign it. And we have a list of attorneys who are not looking to upturn the apple cart and make the parties start all over again. I also happen to be an attorney when I'm not working as a mediator, and I do review work for clients who have gone through mediation with other mediators. And my criteria for review is very simple. Is the agreement written sufficiently as a contract? Does my client understand what they've agreed to? And is there something that they might have agreed to, in my opinion, that they did not? And do they understand why not? That's my criteria. And most review attorneys who are looking at agreements for mediated clients are looking at the same thing.
So you would be considered a mediation-friendly attorney.
I certainly hope so.
With that being said, what advice would you give to couples considering mediation to prepare mentally and practically before starting the process?
That's a good question. And it's very hard because most of them are feeling like they're in limbo and they are emotionally a wreck. Oftentimes, their children, they're very worried about their children and how this is going to impact them. Um, but I, I provide a lot of information, and I truly believe that information is power, and that the more they inform themselves about the kinds of decisions that they need to make, both from a parenting plan standpoint and from a financial standpoint and from a budget standpoint, the more able they are to make these decisions because they know what they need. And we're looking at negotiations from a needs-based place, not a rights-based place. So what we often do when you have two parties that need to figure out their expenses, it's not just the party that's paying the money that needs to figure out receiving the money, it's the party who's paying the money because they can only pay so much and still be able to maintain their lifestyle. And the party who needs the support has to receive enough to be able to maintain their lifestyle. So they're really a team when they're working at their budgets to try to create the best way that everybody can move forward and everybody can be okay. When you leave the mediation table, you are much more prepared for moving forward than you are when your lawyer hands you an agreement and says, here, this is what we've negotiated for you. Go forth and live your life.
Wow. That is really enlightening and interesting, especially since you are saying to them that they have to figure out, or you're working with them to become a team in the midst of, what would appear to be the opposite of being a teen, meaning the divorce itself. In what ways has the rise of online mediation tools impacted, the resolution of marital conflicts, especially for long distance couples?
Well, for me, and I don't know if this is your question, but using Zoom to mediate with clients, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, online mediation tools and how they impact, the resolution of marital conflicts, especially for long distance couples.
Right. When I first started working with clients on Zoom, I was a little concerned because a lot of the work we do deals with reading the room and the emotions and the dynamics and how they interact with one another. But I have found that for most couples, being in a Zoom is beneficial because it removes them from more of the emotion that they deal with and allows them to be kind of separate. But that's not always the case because my protocol is once I start working with a couple, I never communicate with just one of them. If you email me, both parties need to be on the email thread. If we're on a Zoom, I don't let anybody in the room until everybody's there. And what I found a few times is that I have one party waiting in the waiting room for quite a while, and the other party's not there. And I finally will do a chat and say, I'm sorry, I'm just waiting for the other party to let you in. And they say, oh, we're together. And then I let them in and find out they're sitting on the same couch. So it really depends upon the parties, how comfortable they are being together or needing and benefiting from the distance that Zoom creates for them.
So you don't allow them to ever put up still shots then, especially in that environment.
No, I ask them not to. I've occasionally had someone, when they're emotional, maybe turn on their still shot for a few minutes and then they come back to the table or
Yep.
they have to use the restroom, whatever it is. But for
Mhm.
the most part, we need to be present, the three of us, so that we can really complete the work that we need to do.
Divorce mediation allows couples to maintain greater control over the outcomes of their divorce.
In your experience, what qualities make a mediator particularly effective in divorce situations?
So I would say that the qualities that make a mediator particularly effective in divorce are the same qualities that make a mediator particularly effective in everything that they do. It's the ability to work with clients to help them understand what the other person is saying, to learn how to listen, to be able to hear what's being said without the emotion and anger that they often hear through. And any mediator who does mediation has those qualities. The biggest part that divorce mediators need to do is to fi- be informed about the financials, to understand the law. Even though we don't advise clients, if we don't provide them the appropriate information that they need to be able to make informed choices, then they could be creating an agreement that's not going to work for them. And that is terrible because they work so hard and then they find out that their agreement is flawed because they didn't know what they had to think about. So the most important quality for a divorce mediator is all of the qualities that mediators need and continuing to keep your mediation training current so that you are an effective mediator. But most importantly, or equally important, is making sure you're knowledgeable because the laws change and we have to stay on top of that knowledge to be a good conduit of information for our clients.
Divorce is often seen as a legal process, so, but for many families, it's really an emotional journey.
That's the
So,
reason I got into this process is that I saw people who had no financial issues but were fighting tooth and nail because the emotions were driving them. And the process of the court system where disputants come, a third party arbitrates the resolution of their conflict and then sends them on their separate way doesn't work when you're when you have children together, when you've had a personal relationship together. So our system as it was in place doesn't work for families who are ending their marriage but continuing their role as parents of their children. It doesn't work. And mediation allows them the ability to carve out a new relationship as parents of their children, end their spousal relationship, but continue working as parents of their children, whether their children are 5 or whether their children are 50. It doesn't matter. Being able to find a way to be there for their kids, despite the differences that brought them to the process, is the gift I think they give to their children. So it is something that when I meet with couples, oftentimes I'll have them put a picture of their kids on the table so that they remember what was important to them and they can refocus themselves on what's important. That's not to say that mediation can't work for parties that have no children, because again, it's a process that you retain control of. You retain control over the outcome, not somebody else. And when you have to live with the outcome, it's so much easier to live with it when you retain control over it.
With your decades of experience, how does mediation help people navigate the human side of separation?
I think it creates opportunity for them to appreciate the depths of their the other party's feelings and leave hearing things in a different way than they might have entered the room hearing those things.
I have to say that, when you look at it and just listening to you, it's such an enlightening experience for me, and it's going to be the same for our viewing audience as well. It's been a powerful, powerful session.
Well, thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
It's been a privilege to share. When we think about it, a facet of the intricate dance of disagreement and resolution with you. As we remember, the bridges we build from the timbers of conflict can lead us to new prospects of understanding and cooperation. And so I'm Jim Rollins as your host, and until the next episode of Conflict TV, I thank you and look forward to our being here again. And I thank Jill Sanders DeMott for being here today and being such a great host, I should say a great participant, and allowing me to enjoy this time as your host.